Hello and welcome to Newspeak, the New Culture Forum's weekly current affairs programme. I'm your host, Emma Webb, and this week I'm joined, as usual, by Rafe Heydel-Mankoo, historian and senior fellow of the New Culture Forum, the director and founder of the New Culture Forum, Peter Whittle, and cultural historian, academic and senior fellow, Philip Kiszely. This week we are going to be talking about whether or not the government is going in the right direction or in the wrong direction in their response to woke issues. And we'll also be talking about whether women are in physical danger and why it is exactly that leftists seem to care so much about misogyny in the Metropolitan Police, but don't care very much about people carrying placards that say "Decapitate Terfs." So shall we begin by talking about this news story this week, positive news story, Suella Braverman ordering a review into some training that had been given at the Home Office.
This is the one, is it not, where people have been told that they shouldn't say mate, is this right, or use the word homosexual? I mean, frankly, what is she proposing to do? I mean, is she proposing to scrap? I thought they had scrapped it.
Well, this is the thing, so it turned out that, according to one piece of research, that it was something like 2,000 hours worth of staff time was being spent on doing things like unconscious bias training and learning about unconscious incivility and how to be a straight ally and that kind of thing. And so they did scrap the unconscious bias training, but then they found that this training had been given to, of all people, the Homeland Security team, which deal with counterterrorism, so I presume they don't misgender terrorists. And so she's obviously very concerned about this because it doesn't align with her vision for what the Home Office ought to be doing. So she's ordered this review.
It feels like Groundhog Day, though, doesn't it? Yes. In a way, because she's always, if it's not her, it was Priti Patel. They're always pushing back on this stuff, and they're always angry about it.
Why do you think it's so impotent?
Well, nothing ever gets done. It reminds me of it's almost like Yes Minister. When Sir Humphrey Appleby says, "Oh well, we'll have a review. We'll have an internal review." It's that kind of thing. I just think it's gone too far. It's so embedded and so ingrained in the culture that they are completely impotent.
Do you think having a review is just kicking the can down the road? Because they don't really need a review. They know that this has happened and they know what the policy is, and so it shouldn't have happened. So rather than having a review, surely there should be some measures should be taken against the people who brought in this whoever was providing this training course in the first place.
That's right. I mean, government's first recourse is always to have a review, have an independent commission look into something, and it is just another way to kick things into the long grass. And nothing ever happens. Come on, we're now 12 years of this government, and if things haven't happened now, I don't see why anyone can actually have any hope that things are going to happen now magically in the final 18 months of this government's reign, if I can use that term. I mean, and the thing is, this is not just the first time that this has happened in recent times. We've had the same thing happening in Parliament, right, where you've had similar training going on in Parliament. Talk about getting your own house in order first before you. If you can't get your own house, literally the House of Commons in order, how on earth can the country have any faith in what you say very loudly in the red tops about wanting to tackle wokeness?
And in fact, actually, what is supremely funny, actually, almost, although it makes you very angry, in the same breath as this, the Tory Party itself is now offering courses to parliamentary candidates, presumably who are going to be standing next time, 2 years' time, in such things as unconscious bias, and indeed that includes something called white resentment, pure hucksterism, because apparently white resentment is what you are showing if you disagree with unconscious bias training.
Yeah. It's Kafkaesque, isn't it?
Completely Kafkaesque. But the fact is, this is the Tory Party actually giving these courses to their parliamentary candidates, and then people turn around and wonder whether the Tory Party is taking wokery seriously or not, or pushing back against it.
I've got before just quickly to skip in here before you comment on this, Philip. I've got a quote here from from that training given at CCHQ. In the section,
Central Office,
and on the section on racial discrimination, it says, and this is a phrase that you have to get the correct answer to. The requirement to conform to white British cultural practices, such as anglicising names in the workplace, is part of, quote, a system of domination and oppression. So that
it's pure neo-Marxism.
They also say if someone accuses you of unconscious bias, you have to respond positively and thank them. Yes, you're a racist. Oh, am I? Thank you so much. I had no idea.
I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, I mean, talking about microaggressions and mispronouncing names, no one's ever pronounced my name right. I want compensation for this.
Yes,
Give me some compensation. Give me some money for it.
Yes.
That's what it's
But
about.
you're not
isn't
a
it?
designated victim.
I'm not. No, I'm. It's Hungarian as well. Could it possibly be worse? But I was just going to say, has anyone actually done an unconscious bias test?
I haven't, but when I was at City Hall,
I was
all
going
the
to say
staff
for
had
them.
to, all the staff, and my sister Lynn, who you might know, who runs the office here, she did it, and she came unstuck in it actually because it was obvious that the people brought in to do it, they weren't in-house, they're always brought in to do it.
Yeah.
It was constant, basically, why you are bad.
Yeah.
And so she sort of essentially spoke up and said, no, I'm tired of this. I'm tired of having to justify, things I shouldn't have to justify. And from that moment on, the instructor was sort of vaguely mocking.
Yeah.
Said, let's see what Lynn thinks about this. Let's see what Lynn thinks.
Bullying,
that kind
in
of
other
thing.
words.
Yeah. So that is my indirect
almost
experience
as if she's
of
being used as an example to the class of a racist.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Most people in these things, they do them, but they keep quiet and they just get through it.
I did it. I did it for work, and passed it with flying colours. Got 100%. And
So you really are unconsciously
liar.
biased.
But one of the reasons that I did it for actually was self-preservation, protection. Because if anything comes back to me, by God, as it possibly could do, I'll say, but I've passed your test. This is scientific. So how can you say this? It's just kind of really interesting to think about it in that way, because I wonder what they'd say if I push back on it in that way. They'd probably say, "Oh, well, that's only part of it," But even so,
what do you think of the sheer amount of public money that's being spent on this? Because an organisation called Way Forward found that 7 billion of taxpayers' money had been spent on politically motivated campaigns.
it's grotesque.
And just going back to another story from this week, this road name that's been changed, Black Boy Lane, which is named after Charles II. It was his nickname because he had dark hair and a dark complexion. And they have changed the name to, I think it's La Rose Road or something. And the cost of that was £180,000 for all of the consultation and everything, and they didn't even listen to the consultation.
But what's the
because
punchline?
81% of the people that replied
Yeah.
said that they didn't want it to be changed, including all of the ethnic minority people in the street. And the punchline is that that they still have Black Boy Lane on the sign. It says formerly Black Boy Lane underneath. So whatever the offence was is obviously still there, and they've wasted in Haringey, a borough which probably could do with spending the money in many other ways. They've wasted all of this public money on this basically virtue signalling vanity project. And so this is a huge amount of taxpayer money that is just seeping through the holes of local and national government, through the civil service, and there must be leaks everywhere.
The only sorry, Rafe, go on.
No, I was going to say, it's the shadow of Bernie Grant, former leader of Haringey Council in the 80s when it was the Loony left, still looms large. Because as you say, it's actually the most complained about council, one of the least performing councils. And you'd think, given how much poverty there is, £200,000 would go a long way. But part of this payment includes £300 to every resident because of the cost involved in changing title deeds, in changing all of your bank details, all of your suppliers' names have to be
It's just a
notified
fuss
of
for
that.
everyone.
And 80% of them voted against it, including 100% of black people voted against this.
100%.
One of the good things, if we can say, about this government is that the new levelling and regeneration bill is supposed to come into force this year, and that's going to have a requirement that any street name can only be changed if 2/3 of the residents agree to it.
Yeah.
So I think with that, we have to give the government some credit. That should hopefully put a nail in this coffin.
Yes, I know.
But at the same
not to come into to effect to 2030 or something.
I don't know when it's going to come into. I think it should be immediate, I hope. But we're talking about governments going backwards and forwards. Part of this unconscious bias training includes advising people that it may not be polite to ask someone to shake hands if it goes against their religious traditions. Well, I'd like our government to have the balls, if I can say, of the Danish government, which has made it a law now that when you're at citizenship ceremonies, you have to shake hands as a condition of gaining Danish citizenship. They've raised shaking hands into almost a national value. These are our ways, and you must accommodate them. And Switzerland is also going the same way. Now, why can't our government do something so basic?
Do you think that, going back to what you were saying, Peter, about this Home Office guidance that Braverman is pushing back against, which isn't, sorry, I shouldn't say Home Office guidance because it's not official guidance issued by the Home Office, it was just part of this training programme. But the attack on the word homosexuality, and it described homosexuality as being a medical term. Now, do you think that a lot of this is, as you're saying with the shaking hands issue as well, that a lot of this is actually fundamentally quite regressive?
Well, it's regressive. I know, I mean, I'm sounding like a broken record here, Emma, but the thing is, yes, it's regressive, but there's no sort of logic to any of it. It's an attack. It's an attack on the language. It's an attempt.
And the idea of sex and sexuality.
Yes, but it's hugely successful. They do own the language now. I mean, the way that everyone discusses everything and the labels they use, even if they don't agree, they tend to be a little bit tentative about using them because they don't quite know whether they're going to get into trouble. It's one point I wanted to, you're talking about local council. One thing I've found very interesting when we're on the subject of language is that there is a local council in London. I'm afraid I can't remember which one it is. They've got rid of this BAME, now it's acronym, which is Black and Ethnic Minority. But they've replaced it with the global majority.
That's right, yeah.
The global majority. Now, to me, that's actually quite sinister. So a council elected in London is saying the global majority. I would say that's the ultimate passive-aggressive thing.
Can I just add one thing to this debate? And I think it's great. I don't know who wrote the article about this, about the Black Boy Lane thing. But it was really good because what she did was she
Emily Carver.
That's right, and she looked at the minutes, didn't she? Of the so I think that's the way to really push back on this stuff, because taking individual words or phrases and we can say, oh my God, look what they're doing to the language. They're pulling the language apart. They're doing something Orwellian. That goes a certain way, but the oxygen of publicity for this, through the absolute stupidity of nobody wanting this apart from a handful of activists and yet them pushing it through anyway, people do really balk at that because they see the process. It's almost looking behind the curtain, isn't it, and seeing just how utterly and totally undemocratic this is.
And it's almost like a communist system that you would pay all of this money to have fake consultation that no one's ever going to listen to anyway unless it gives you the right result, and then you waste all of this taxpayer money, but there's no public accountability whatsoever because it doesn't matter what the local residents want. The local government are going to do whatever the hell they like anyway, and they're going to spend your money doing it.
And that was why it was such a great article, because it showed that in neon lights.
But the thing is, you see, we're watching all of this going on, but you see, you come back to this original point really, where is the pushback on it? People, these are minorities exerting huge amounts of influence actually at a local, national level, but the pushback has to come in terms, I would say, ultimately electorally. That's why this thing with the Tory Party is so important. If you really still want to vote Tory after all the things you're learning, you really do get what you deserve, I think.
Let's segue onto the subject of sex, because this ties into it because of the Home Office advice.
Yes, exactly.
No sex, please.
Not on my watch.
That aspect that we touched on of that Home Office training, attacking just the concept of sex, the idea of sex and sexuality. Because also in the news this week we've seen at this rally that took place in Scotland in response to the gender recognition bill that Nicola Sturgeon's trying to push, that the government then blocked. in this protest, there were where there were many MPs present. There was someone carrying a placard that said "Decapitate Terfs," and this was actually put in a big pile of all the other placards, presumably by the organisers, so you could see it very clearly. So it wasn't as if it was sort of like viewed as being fringe or anything. And this has come at the same time as a number of violent posts to TERFs, like this guy, some journalists did an investigation to try and find out who this guy was who was posting these things, and Brendan O'Neill referred to them as being gender jihadis. And he talks about, and this stuff is really, really, like the violence, the fantasizing is really graphic and quite gruesome. So he talks about taking out J.K. Rowling with a hammer because he hates her so much, and they always talk about trying to eliminate hate, but then they use the word hate very freely and liberally. Not liberally, but you know what I mean. And he talks about seeing women,
Parker.
the defenders of women and girls, this is a quote, exploding like baked beans on your windshield. He talks about hitting Posey Parker's crowd with a car. He talks about the MP Rosie Duffield. He says, "I'm going to see Rosie Duffield at a bar with a big gun." And so we keep seeing all of this sort of very. It's almost there's something so graphic and such sort of like a fantasy for these people. It's almost pornographic in the way that they talk about it, fantasizing about physically. And this placard had a picture of a guillotine on it, the one that said "Decapitate Terfs." And so Brendan O'Neill was making the point that that gender critical feminists have now become, this attitude towards gender critical feminists has now become the bigotry that is permissible in our society. So what do you think about not just this as an issue, but also the way that the left has chosen to respond to this? Because J.K. Rowling pointed out that the MPs, the Scottish politicians, seem to have had some kind of temporary blindness where they didn't notice the sort of violence of these placards and things that people were saying. So how do we explain that hypocrisy of the left when it comes to criticising misogyny in the Metropolitan Police and in the police force? So some misogyny bad, but other misogyny fine and somehow laudable.
Well, it's traditional political hypocrisy.
Is the left systemically misogynist?
No, I don't know about that. You see, I mean, what worries me actually about this more in a way, Emma, is, and I wonder what you feel about this, but when you look at these trans activists, women are at the forefront. I don't get it. I mean, whether it is on these demonstrations that you just mentioned where they have those placards, or whether it's in fact senior American politicians in front of House committees saying, "I'm not a biologist, so I can't define a woman." A woman saying this. What's going on? Why are women allowing this to happen? This is the crucial thing. Everyone says, "Oh, well, it's a misogyny thing." Well, actually, why are women?
That's what's so extraordinary, is
left-wing women
seeing these Scottish politicians, female Scottish politicians, in a crowd with a placard that says "Decapitate Terfs." Like they're not holding it, but they were present. That they could, on the one hand, spend so much energy condemning misogyny in some settings, and
but
talking
not in
about
others.
systemic misogyny,
it is.
but then to not feel horrified by the violence of the language that is being regularly used by these trans activists against TERFs. That it's more than just hypocrisy. It's more than just doublethink. There's something really profound going on there. And I know, Peter, you said before that these things don't necessarily make sense. It's just an attack. But there's got to be. I mean, you would think that anybody would have a visceral response to that kind of pornographic hatred.
Can we just come back and pick up on this word pornographic, because I think it's really important. Okay, and there have been quite a few instances just this week. There was another instance of a 60-year-old man. This was in Essex, actually. It wasn't in Scotland. 60-year-old man dressed as a schoolgirl. Do you know about this?
Yeah.
Hanging around outside a school with a wig on, with a ponytail and a skirt, and the police, rather than telling him off, they went to see him, but rather than telling him off, they were telling people off for misgendering him. Okay.
And saying not to share his photograph.
And not to share his photograph. So that's one thing. Okay, but I think what we've got with the whole trans thing descending onto the street is autogynephilia, which that guy is. It's autogynephilia. It's Pornhub meeting the street. It's Pornhub standing outside of schools. And that essentially is what it's about, because it really is about sexual fetishism. But people don't talk about sexual fetishism, do they? They call it kink. Okay, so that makes it, acceptable. It's only kink, Michael. What's wrong with you? It's only kink. This is children we're dealing with here. This is women, and these fantasies, these very aggressive fantasies, are really, really frightening. So it's the idea that these people are living in a online fantasy world and a pornographic world, and it's when that world hits reality that we really see the problems.
I'm not suggesting that this guy is an autogynephiliac or whatever, but I don't know if you saw this video on TikTok of this trans guy. It was on TikTok. It was shared by Libs of TikTok. It's on Twitter. This trans guy who is long hair but bearded, still very much looks like a man, identifies as a woman, looks like a man, and he's talking about how unsafe he would feel having to go into, I hope I'm not misremembering this, how unsafe he would feel having to go into a man's bathroom because some woman had taken issue with him going into the woman's bathroom, and this is somewhere in the US, I think. But what that raised to me as an issue, which relates to this, is just how much women and children are getting the short end of the stick here, and that's putting it lightly. Because what about women feeling unsafe with men coming into their toilets? Why is it only a trans person feeling unsafe going into their biological gender's toilet? Why do we care more about the safety of a guy who's having his photo shared wearing a child's uniform and dressing as a girl, but not about the safety of the children from the primary school?
But the answer to that is the zero sum of the victimhood hierarchy, isn't it? And the trans person will always be at the top of that hierarchy.
And perhaps that explains the doublethink when it comes to misogyny, because the TERFs are being viewed as at the top of the hierarchy.
Also, just simply don't ever underestimate the sheer nastiness of these people.
Yeah.
Not just in relation to trans, but just generally, the nastiness of them. They parade under the banner of kindness, be kind. That's a surefire sign, a way of telling whether this is a nasty person. Anyone who says that they're kind and compassionate, you should always be very, very wary. I think that's it. I know the one you're talking about, this guy saying, I feel unsafe in this toilet and everything. He's scruffy, huge bloke with hair, mental case. These are mental cases.
I would say also, where are the police in all of this, right? The police are so quick to jump on an innocent old man who retweets something completely innocent and gets a visit from the constabulary, and yet here we have demonstrated acts of misogyny and hatred and inciting to violence, actually, in terms of tweets and the physical presence, with faces clearly documented saying, eat TERF, I eat TERFs and Tories, as well as and saying decapitate them, and nothing has been heard at all from the police on this. This is double standard. And also with these politicians, J.K. Rowling said, they were temporarily blind. What's more interesting is how they surely know what was going on in that parade around them, and they only condemned it once the media published articles about it. Until that point, perfectly happy.
And it always happens time and time again. Exactly the same thing happened with Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell, when they've got all of these grotesquely anti-Semitic murals at the back of them. Oh, was it there? I didn't realise.
Present but not involved.
But imagine if you were at a feminist rally and someone had a sign saying decapitate trans. Well, then you'll see a furore, wouldn't
they'd
you?
Sit up there.
And also, imagine if politicians actually, say you had, Jacob Rees-Mogg or Mark Francois at a Brexit rally or something, and someone behind them had Decapitate Blacks, they wouldn't be in office for more than a week, right? They'd be out by Friday, just
or
by
Remainers,
virtue
or
of
Rejoiners.
that photograph. And yet nothing has been. There's no repercussions on these two. It's the willingness to. It's a willingness to forgive things said by the trans lobby, which you wouldn't have on the other side.
But I think there's something we really do need to kind of acknowledge here, and the violence is round the corner. Okay, that video that you were talking about, and he was talking about how he said, I lost it. I really lost it with these women, you know, and the violence, the potential violence there was palpable. Because a lot of it is in mental illness, and you know, having those people in those toilets, it's a recipe for disaster.
I'm afraid that's going to have to be the note that we end on. So thank you so much, Rafe, Philip and Peter. We could talk about that subject for a lot longer. I think probably we'll return to it in future episodes. So if you like what you've seen, please like, comment and subscribe. And thank you very much for watching. We will see you next time on Newspeak.
Hello. If you're enjoying the New Culture Forum channel and you believe in our mission, may I invite you to join our membership scheme at the link below or on our website, newcultureforum.org.uk. Our work is more important now than ever, and we have great plans ahead for the future, but we can't do it without your support. From as little as £3 per month, you can help ensure that we continue on our mission. As a member, you'll receive a range of benefits, including access to exclusive content, invitations to our private events, including here at our studios, free copies of our books, and much, much more, including, of course, our famous NCF mug. If you aren't able to become a member, then please help us by clicking this button and subscribing to our channel. It's completely free. Just remember to also click the bell icon so that you can get notifications when we post new videos. Thank you.